Shabbat Shalom, everyone. A good Sabbath. Welcome. Nice to be with you, all our friends from Beit Tikva, congregants, and friends around the country. So let's begin our music for this Shabbat evening with the beautiful words of Yedid Nefesh, my heart's delight. And if you have a prayer book, we're in the middle of page 128. Continuing with the blessing over the Shabbat candles, and I hope that you'll be able to light your own nerot at home. So we are reading in the middle of page 121, middle of 121. A source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love. Together we sing the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlikner shel Shabbat. Let's turn to 124, top of the page, and we'll read this meditation together. We enter this sanctuary to welcome Shabbat. Within these walls, we sit surrounded by numberless generations. Our ancestors built the synagogue as a visible sign of God's presence in their midst. Throughout our long history and our endless wanderings, it has endured. A beacon of truth, love, and justice for all humanity. Its presence guided our ancestors to lives of righteousness, holding up to them a vision of their truest selves. Now we in our turn come into this sanctuary to affirm the sacredness of our lives. May we enter this place in peace. May holiness wrap around us as we cross its threshold. Weariness, doubt, the flaws within our human hearts, the harshness of the weak, let these drop away at the door. In the brightness of Shabbat, let peace settle upon us as we lift our hearts in prayer. Let's turn to the Psalms as we welcome the Shabbat. There are 6 traditional Psalms that are sung as part of the Kabbalat Shabbat, the welcoming of the Sabbath. And we begin with Psalm 95, as Jews do all over the world. In our prayer books, it's on page 130. The words are L'chu Neranena. Together in English on the bottom of the page, we're on 130. Come, let us sing joyously to Adonai. Raise a shout for our rock and deliverer. Let us come into God's presence with praise. Let us raise a shout for God in song. For Adonai is a great God, the great ruler of all divine beings. In God's hand are the depths of the earth. The peaks of the mountains are God's. God's is the sea, God made it, and the land which God's hands fashioned. Come, let us bow down and kneel, bend the knee before Adonai, our Maker. For Adonai is our God, and we are the people God tends, the flock in God's care. Oh, if you would but heed God's charge this day. Let's continue with Psalm 97. We're on the top of page 133 in the Siddurim. From Psalm 97. Adonai is sovereign, let the earth exult, the many islands rejoice. Dense clouds are around God, righteousness and justice are the base of God's throne. O you who love Adonai, hate evil. God guards the lives of God's loyal ones, saving them from the hand of the wicked. Light is sown for the righteous, radiance for the upright. O you righteous, rejoice in Adonai and acclaim God's holy name. If you consider these words in the English carefully, you'll see that the theme is sovereignty. God's ruling over all the earth, over all the nations. And it's repeated, so to speak, in the words of righteousness and justice and God's throne. And that is the thread that weaves through all 6 of these Psalms, that God is, so to speak, the sovereign of the world, the creator of the world, the creator of nature and everything that we enjoy. And on the Sabbath, we give thanks for all that we have been given, have been offered by the Almighty One. So let's turn over a few pages. We come to our favorite song, one of our favorites, Lela Dawkins, which is on page 138. Lela Dawkins was a Sabbath melody composed by Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, in Tzfat in the late 1500s. He and his compatriots, the other great Sephardi rabbis, wrote many Shabbat melodies to welcome in the Sabbath bride. So we're singing verses 1, 2, and 9, page 138. Lecha dodi Shabbat nekabela. Shamo v'zachor b'dibur echad. Ishmi'anu elam yuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad. L'shem utferet l'tila. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala. B'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala. B'nei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha. Ki hi mikor habracha. Merosh mikedem v'sucha. Zomazeh b'machvat tefila. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala. B'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala. B'nei Shabbat nekabela. Last verse, please rise. Ovi v'shalom materet bala. Gam b'simcha u'b'tzahala. Toch emuneh am sula. Tohiv l'avoichala. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala. B'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala. B'nei Shabbat nekabela. Let's read one more psalm. If you'll turn please to 141. In the middle of the page, we'll enjoy the words of Psalm 93. Adonai is sovereign, God is robed in grandeur. Adonai is robed, God is girded with strength. The world stands firm, it cannot be shaken. Your throne stands firm from of old, from eternity you have existed. The ocean sounds Adonai, the ocean sounds its thunder, the ocean sounds its pounding. Above the thunder of the mighty waters, more majestic than the breakers of the sea, is Adonai majestic on high. Your decrees are indeed enduring. Holiness befits your house, Adonai, for all times. So we turn now to the traditional melody of Chatzi Kaddish, the half Kaddish. We're on page 144. 144, we'll sing together a cappella. Yitkadav, Yitkadav, Shemei Rabbah, Yamad Ibrachute, Yamlich Machute, V'chayechom, U'b'yomechom, U'chayetecha Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Ba'agala, U'bizman Garib, Imru, Amen. Yeshmira b'mevorach, le'alam yamei amaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, Yitbar v'ramam v'naseh, v'yidada, v'yitaleh, v'yitalah, Shemer Kedusha brichu, Lela minko b'chata v'shirata, Tushvechata v'nehemata, Damiram yama, B'meru, Amen. Please rise if you're able. We'll continue now with the call to worship, the Baruch Hu. We're on page 146, 146. Baruch Hu et Adonai, Amvorach, first blessing, middle of page 148. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzevaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on the evening. Baruch atah Adonai, Amariv Aravim. The second blessing, giving thanks for the gift of Torah and all the commandments from the ultimate one. We're in the middle of page 150. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Together we sing the Shema Yisrael. The words are on page 152. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kivod, Malchuto Leolam Vaed. You may be seated. If you're already seated, then relax, enjoy. We're continuing now with the blessings, the prayers after the Shema Yisrael. We always begin, of course, from Deuteronomy, and the words are on the top of page 154, together in the Hebrew. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha u'b'lechtecha v'derech u'b'shachbecha u'vkumecha u'kshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha u'chtabtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha L'man tizkaru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'hitem keroshim le'Elohechem Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim li'yod lachem le'Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem Emet. Let's read together in the English. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home, when you are away, when you lie down, and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and to be holy unto your God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God. Adonai Elohechem Emet. So we turn to the wonderful words from Exodus, Mi Chamocha, which we always sing on Friday night, as well as the morning service. We're on page 158. Adonai for redeeming the house of Israel. Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. Let's turn to the beautiful words of Hashkivenu, the blessing that we recite in the evening to remind us of God's protection and shelter, his good counsel upon us to protect us from enemies, war, famine, and plague. Let's read this English rendering on page 161, top of page 161. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim. Another favorite Shabbat melody, Vishamru. We're on page 162, singing together. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. B'nei Yisrael, Muti olam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Take a 15-second pause. So we continue our prayers with the Tefillah, the 7 basic blessings of the Sabbath service, beginning on page 164. And if you're able, in the comfort of your own homes, please stand up as we recite these blessings together. We always sing the opening verse from Psalm 51, and then we'll sing together on page 166, and then skip over to page 168. And then we'll be seated and continue in English. Beginning with Adonai Sifatai Titach, page 164. Adonai Sifatai Titach, Ufia Giti Latecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, v'Elohei avodeinu imodenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, חסדי אבות ואימהות, מביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו ואהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. Page 168. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, צומח נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצביע ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה הכל. Let's read the third blessing together in the middle of 171 in the English. Where might I go to find you, exalted, hidden one, yet where I would not go to find you, ever-present, eternal one. My heart cries out to you, please draw near to me. The moment I reach out for you, I find you reaching for me. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Blessed are you, O God, the Holy One, the Holy God. So let's all be seated and comfortable. We'll continue with blessings 4, 5, and 6, and then Shalom Rav. We're on page 173 in the English, 173. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. The blessing of Ritzeh, of asking God's favor upon us, upon the people of Israel, and accepting all our prayers. Let's read together page 175. Ever-present one, may we, your people Israel, be worthy in our deeds and our prayer. Wherever we live, wherever we seek you, in this land, in Zion restored, in all lands, you are our God, whom alone we serve in reverence. Baruch atah Adonai, shotcha levadcha b'yirah na'avod. We continue with a blessing of thanksgiving. We're on 177. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth, which day by day sustains us. For all these and more, we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, ato shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. So we conclude this part of the service with Shalom Rav, a prayer of peace for all of us, for all the world, and for the people of Israel. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Ki Tohu Melech moment of prayer and meditation for our own personal thoughts, our own personal prayers. So we want to think of all of our dear friends and members of the congregation and your loved ones, your family members in need of a special blessing of strengthening, healing for one's physical and emotional, psychological needs. We all need to be uplifted at this time. I want to mention a few dear folks from the congregation and friends of our congregation. First of all, our cantor's father, Eliodoro Herrera, and we're also thinking of Wendy Denkoff, our beloved member and flautist, clarinetist, and fantastic musician who's resting a little bit at home right now. Arlene Vinnick and her grandson, Ryan Vinnick, who is going through a surgery at this very day. We also are thinking of Doreen Herdig and Lynn Kelly, Flo Vinnick, and Helen Fine, and also our dear friend, congregant Joel Schneider. Any other folks you're thinking of? Okay, stay strong and stay healthy, please. So let's sing together. We're in the middle of page 371 for the Misha Berach prayer, page 371. So we are studying this week, of course, Vayera, which is an extraordinary Torah portion which encompasses Genesis chapters 18 all the way through 22. There's so many stories, so many fantastic insights in these 4 chapters. We could be here till Shabbat evening, until Havdalah, and still not have covered everything, but guess what? We only have a few minutes. So I just want to remind you, Vayera means the Lord appeared. Why did God appear? Because Abraham had just had his circumcision and was recovering from this incredible operation. And yet, in spite of his suffering, he was, in fact, at the mouth of the tent, at the opening of the tent, looking out, ready to welcome strangers. Guess what happens? 3 malachim, 3 messengers. They could have been men, but they were probably angelic messengers from the divine, came to visit him. He's lonely. He needs friends. He needs companionship. He needs bikur cholim, the mitzvah of someone doing the good deed of visiting the sick. Can you imagine at 99 years old having to go through a circumcision? Hey. So these malachim come to tell him that a year hence, his wife will give birth and will bring forth a son that they've been waiting for years, and that will of course be Yaakov. But we're getting ahead of the story. You know also there are other incredible vignettes going on in this Torah portion, including Abraham's encounter with God later on, when God tests him and asks him to take Isaac. Excuse me, I was thinking of Isaac first of all, not Yaakov. He takes Isaac up the mountain, up Mount Moriah, and goes through that existential trial, which of course he will succeed in that development. I want to talk about something else this Shabbat, short and sweet. I want to talk about how we make some unforgivable errors. And it's based on the idea, actually it comes from a story, you remember Agatha Christie's stories, and Hercule Poirot, the inspector, Mr. Poirot, he's talking to his good friend, the captain, and he says, "It is your destiny to stand beside me and prevent me from committing an unforgivable error." And the captain says, "What's an unforgivable error?" And Poirot answers, "Overlooking the obvious." Overlooking the obvious. So what do I mean by this unforgivable error? It's not just something that happened in an Agatha Christie story. It's something that we all experience really almost every week or every day of our own lives. We are so advanced, we're so technologically superior in so many ways these days. Long after we sent a mission to the moon, now we have private rockets. We have Elon Musk sending up people into space for a mere fraction, a few shekels here and there. We have new technologies. There's even a technology being developed now in Israel where they can create meat, real basar, from a machine, from chemicals. And it is, in fact, truly, it is really meat, but it doesn't come from animals. I mean, think about the amazing things we have done, and yet we overlook things that are close at hand, things that are just simple, straightforward, as I said, unforgivable errors. So here's the story in the Torah about an unforgivable error. Before we have the story of Abraham and his test on Mount Moriah, we have the story about Hagar. Remember, Hagar had been given to Abraham, and she became pregnant, and her son is Ishmael. And Ishmael is dying of thirst. They are down south meaning south of Jerusalem, going towards Beersheba, a good 60, 70, 80 miles away. And in despair, in this desert climate, she places her child under the shrubs and sits some distance away. She's in a sense giving up on him. She doesn't know what's going to happen. And she says, I cannot sit here and see my own child die. And thus, as she's sitting there at a distance and weeping, God opens up her eyes and she suddenly sees a well, an oasis with water. And the Torah says she went there, she filled up her bottle with water, and she gave her son Ishmael to drink. She gave him water to sustain himself so he wouldn't die. So let's kind of go over that story one more time. What does the Torah tell us about this deliverance? God didn't create the well like that. Just because she was praying didn't mean God miraculously set a well there in front of her in a matter of transcendent power. The well had always been there. The well was always there. The oasis was always there. Her salvation was really there. What God did for Hagar was to open up her eyes. She was so exhausted, so immersed in her crying, in her own sadness, that she had completely overlooked the obvious. That's what I'm trying to say, that you and I overlook the obvious. Just as the Almighty did for Hagar and saved Ishmael, so also we experience miracles every day. The prayer book says, thank you, God, for the miracles which attend to us daily, morning, noon, and evening. And think of what we've all been going through for the last 9-10 months. Our parched days, our loneliness, our isolation, restless nights, worried about so many things going on in our world, and people calling all the time, especially calling the rabbis, ministers, for comfort or for complaining, for shrieing, for crying, lamenting. The fact is, sometimes there are oases right in front of our eyes and we don't even see them. Helen Keller once expressed this idea in her own words in one of her autobiographies. She said, I have walked with people whose eyes are full of light, but they don't see anything in the woods. They don't see anything in the sea or the sky, nothing in the city streets, nothing, even though they look. If it would be far better, she said, to sail forever in the night of blindness, with sense and feeling and mind, than to be thus content with the mere act, the mere perception of seeing. So what I want to suggest to all of us on this Sabbath is, let's open up our eyes and see some of the bright spots in the world, not just the tumultuous, problematic things that we've been inured in for the past year. Think about this. You remember the great dancer Agnes DeMille, one of the great American artists of the 20th century? She was dancing and performing at Lincoln Center in New York into her 80s. I think she lived to be 96 or 98 years old. Agnes DeMille, in her late 50s, was struck by a very serious illness. And it took her months and months and months to recover, to a certain extent. And what she said about her recovery, because she was able to continue dancing to a limited extent after that, she said, I had a body that was destroyed, ruined, but I had a new way of looking at things. My life pattern had been broken and my habits were smashed, but the fight back to regain health and to regain a new sense of awareness was so powerful. It's invigorating to call a sharp halt to one's life and then to pay attention to what's going on and what you and I are doing. And that's the essence of it all, what Agnes DeMille went through. That even after incredible sadness and illness, in her late 60s, she went back and danced in New York City on Broadway and in Lincoln Center and was choreographing. Here's a beautiful Hasidic tale which sums up everything I'm trying to say. There's this famous story of Reb Isaac. In those days, everyone was called Reb. It's just an honorary title. It means like Mr., my dear friend. Reb Isaac lived in Krakow, and he had a dream all the time, and every night he dreamed that he would be under a bridge which would lead to the king's palace, and if he got to the king's palace, he would find a great treasure. So he decided, since he was so poor, he was tired of living in this little shtetl outside of Krakow, he needed to go to the city and find the palace. So he made the journey, he finds the bridge. He dares not to dig under the bridge because you could be thrown in prison if you did that kind of thing. So the bridge, of course, is guarded by the king's courtiers. Finally, one night, because Rabbi Isaac stood there thinking about what he should do, finally the guard comes up to him and says, "What in the heck are you doing here? Why are you spending all this time near the bridge?" So Rabbi Isaac tells him about this dream and tells him about, if only this would happen, I would find my fortune, my treasure. And the guard bursts out laughing and says to him, "You have faith in such dreams? If I believed in dreams, I would go back to Krakow, to that little shtetl, because long ago I dreamed that there was a treasure buried underneath the kitchen stove of a man named Reb Isaac." So Reb Isaac looked at him with his eyes wide open, took his shovel, ran home, dug up the treasure underneath his wife's stove, and there he was, filled with goodness, filled with all the things he ever wanted. It was right there in his own house. And because of that extraordinary fortune, really was the gift of the Almighty, he took the money and built a shul, and is known in Krakow as Reb Isaac's shul. So don't let that unforgivable error pass you by. Don't forget what's really good right in front of your own eyes. Shabbat Shalom. A special thanks to Jolene, who has returned from traveling with Robert, and we're so happy you're here. Thank you for playing the piano today. Thank you, Lela, for recording our services. What's happening this week? Special things. We have our class on the Psalms this Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. If you can join us, it will also be recorded as well. Next Shabbat, our cantor, Ephraim Herrera, will be singing with us for the services. So please plan on listening. It'll be a gorgeous service. And a week from Monday is our Board of Trustees meeting. Our closing prayers begin on page 586. Page 586. We sing together the Aleinu, which is, you'll find in the middle of page 586. And if you're able, please stand up and we'll sing it together. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tekulu l'yotzei breshit, shelo asanu degoyei haratzot, v'lo zamanu k'mishvichot adama, shelo samelkenu kahem, v'gohor aleinu k'chol amonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim, u'modim, livnei melech, malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. V'nema v'haya Adonai, lemelech al kol haaretz, v'yom mahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. We're on 583. 583. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we're weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we're lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as they live, we too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. We recall during this period of Shloshim our dear congregant Melanie Hornstein, wife of Barry Hornstein. And on this, their yahrzeit observance from this Shabbat through the end of next week, we recall now Glenna Jean Brennan, daughter of John Graham, Carl Cohen and Renee Cohen, father-in-law, mother-in-law of Linda Cohen, Shirley Cohen, mother of Larry Cohen, Daniel Duno, father of Carlos Duno, Jerome Gold, stepfather of Gail Rappaport, Louise Handler, mother of Carolyn Handler Miller, Herman Kessler, father of Joan Kessler, Helen Levy, my aunt, and Orville R. McNichol, father of Connie Rosenberg. Let's turn to the words of the Kaddish, page 598. Page 598, please join us. Excuse me. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah, v'yamad yibrach chirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chayei d'chol beis Yisrael, v'agala b'zman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mavarach, le'olam omei amayah, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yinaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalau shemei d'kudsha brichu Lela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata tamiran v'yama v'imru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Say shalom b'mramav, uyaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael b'imru amen. May the source of harmony on high bring us peace, bring peace to our nation, to our world, to the land of Israel. We say amen. Please join us and we'll sing the blessing over the wine, which is really sanctifying the holiness of the Sabbath day. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedushanu v'metzotav v'ratzavanu. Shabbat kacho yavau ratzon inchilanu zikaron lemahase bereshit ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh zecher litziat Mitzrayim ki banu v'charta yotanu kidashta mikol hamim v'shabbat kadshicha v'yahava uvratzon inchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen. L'chaim. Shabbat shalom. A good Sabbath to everyone.